So they hired him to be director of football administration about 6 months ago. And I didn't know this until Jay Glazer reported it on the Fox pregame show yesterday, and that's when Sean Payton saw it and decided to tweet about it and said that it was unbelievable. Of course, the NFL said that Cerullo should be commended for coming forward with the information that he gave the league, back in 2011 that led to the punishment for the Saints in 2012. And certainly that would seem like a conflict of interest, but the issue that made it a bigger story than it actually was is that Mike Florio at Pro Football Talk reported that Cerullo would play a role in, and before I even say this, it's not true, but Pro Football Talk reported that Cerullo would play a role in determining the punishment for Sean Payton as a result of his unsportsmanlike conduct penalty against the Falcons. And someone from the league office said that's just not true. That's not what his department has any role in. That is something that Troy Vincent does, just as the same he does, with players in determining their punishment. So a lot of fans got, up in arms about how could this guy who has it in for the Saints, he's a disgruntled former employee, have any role in this. But as I said, just not true, so no conspiracy there. We can definitely question the hiring, and talk about whether or not that's kosher.
Well, here's my question on the story. He wasn't just hired, right? He's been hired for a while. So why is this coming up now? Where did that come from? I think we all know. This was a leak from the Saints organization. There'd be no reason for that to have been leaked out in any other reason or fashion other than the timing. If you got hired 6 months ago and the story broke, then you could understand it. The fact that it leaked out now in the middle of this chaos of conspiracy theories running around, that the league office has it in for the Saints, which we heard a lot of during Bountygate, it's just silly. And so I agree. We had to report on it. Once Sean Payton goes on social media and acknowledges it, it becomes really a story, and you have to kind of clear the air. Herbie, what did you think of that whole story?
Well, I was actually at a sports bar on the day off trying to take in some games when obviously all that news broke, and Josh alerted me with a text message, and I was like, what's going on here? And when you start reading all that stuff, the timing, as you said, Jeff, is kind of questionable because you're coming off of a loss where obviously the Saints were penalized 11 times for 87 yards, and there's a lot of angst out there, or the officials were against the Saints, et cetera, and then 2-3 days later this comes out. So of course, became cynical, and that's basically my reaction to it. I don't believe
cynical, right? Journalists.
Exactly. I don't believe in conspiracy theories, and that's just the bottom line. I don't believe in it.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that the league office would have any reason to undermine any of their teams. I mean, they want what's best for all the teams. So it makes no sense to try and undermine it, so I don't want to go there at all.
Well, I think it was my fault expecting to have a relaxing Sunday because the Saints weren't playing when, we've seen time and time again in the year and a half that I've covered them, that they just have to keep themselves relevant at some point. If no one's talking about them, there has to be something, whether it's the Brandon Cooks trade popping out at the Combine or, whatever the case may be. And then do we even want to talk about the ref thing too?
I'm not a big believer in the referee. Look, I'll say this. Let's talk about it just to this degree. I rewatched the game a couple times looking at the calls just to see for myself. And I didn't find any really bogus calls except the Sheldon Rankins call, which I think we all agree was egregious. But that happens. We all know quarterbacks get protected in this league above and beyond reason anymore. And I've seen Drew Brees get many of those same calls. Many times. So, I understand the biggest issue, and I was talking to a friend last night who's a big Saints fan, and he was saying, well, the 9 first downs that they gained by penalty, the Atlanta Falcons, were the most in 20 years in the NFL. So I understand that somebody's saying that that's a big deal. But the point is, first of all, the 9th one was Sean Payton running onto the field to get a 15, get the 15-yard penalty at the end for the personal foul. But when I went back and watched all the infractions, what I saw was an aggressive Saints game plan by Dennis Allen to play man-to-man outside on the perimeter against some very good receivers, and you're going to win and lose some of those battles. The Saints won some of them with interceptions by Marshawn Lattimore. Both of those interceptions, one by Lattimore, one by Marcus Williams, were very handsy, where they were grappling with the receiver, and he got position each time the Saints defender made the play. but then other times they get called for holding. That's what led to all these infractions, was the strategy, in my opinion.
So I have 2 points. First of all, your friend is wrong. That stat that he had was wrong. I looked it up. Since 1999, which is apparently when Pro Football Reference started keeping track of first downs by penalty, the most any team has had since 1999 is 10 first downs by penalty. It happened twice, so the Saints didn't set any kind of record. There was also another team that had 9. And then the other thing is that when you have a defensive penalty, most defensive penalties end up in first downs.
Yes.
So, we can't just sit here. I mean, half the penalties in the league end up in first downs unless it's on the offense, false start or holding, things like that. So there's that issue. And then the other thing, and I think, fans, a lot of them don't want to admit, when you have backups in the game, that's when you're going to have more penalties. I know people like to, diagnose it as, oh, they're undisciplined. Talent is probably the biggest reason for penalties happening in the league. Look at Matt Khalil, the left tackle for the Panthers. He's terrible. So when he played the Saints a couple weeks ago, that's why he had 2 penalties guarding Cam Jordan, because he couldn't guard him. So when you lose A.J. Klein, when you lose Kenny Vaccaro, when Marshawn Lattimore is dealing with an ankle injury and an illness, he has to hold Julio Jones twice. I mean, these are things that happen, and certainly, you look at the numbers and they're lopsided, and you look at the first downs and maybe the timing of some of them, and it definitely is bad optics, but it makes sense.
When you rewatch the game, I think it makes a lot of sense, because I didn't see any of the calls that I thought were particularly bad. I thought they all were. Now, you could make the argument, which some Saints fans have, that the Falcons were also holding in the secondary and were getting called for that. That's another way to look at it. But then it just comes into play home cooking, which we all see all the time in the NFL. It happens for both teams. So I just feel like, the head coach has set this hornet's nest astir with his actions, and, he should be concentrating on his team and getting his team better.
Something else to consider when you look at Thursday night football games as a whole. Usually they tend to be sloppy, because when you think about the preparation that the teams have to go through from a Sunday game to a Thursday game, you're only dealing with walk-through practices. They're not going full speed. So of course, when you get on the football field, now there's going to be the kind of holding that you're not going to get during the regular practice, because they're not really practicing.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's Sunday to Thursday. There's really not a lot of time to really get up to full speed.
Yeah, that's a good point. Let's go to the phone lines real quick. Here all the time. Always has good insight. DJ in NOLA East. DJ, what's going on this Monday?
Hey, good morning, Jeff, and your guests, Josh and Herbie. Look, one of the things, and y'all just mentioned about the penalty thing in Atlanta. I just wrote that game off as you said. Falcons were at home, and it was going to be tough for the Saints to get any kind of breaks, especially after so many injuries and all. But look, I was thinking about this weekend and the fans, and their insight on the team. After going 7-9 for 3 straight years, it was just refreshing to know that the Saints already have 9 wins, and if everything works out, they'll probably end up with 11 or 12, and I think that's going to be a great season for the team. But one of the questions I had was, after the first 2 games, I didn't lose faith, because I just thought that there was a lot of communication problems, with the defense. And one of the questions I had was, who made the call on Davante Harris, being not only on the team but starting, and Ken Crowley being inactive for those first 2 games. I just thought it was just a horrendous insight on the coaching, that they actually had this guy that's now starting and, considered one of the, better cornerbacks on the team, down to, who made the decision that Harris is going to be on the team and starting in his place. And I just wanted to get you guys' insight on that. Now hang up and listen.
Thanks, DJ. And I'll tell you what we'll do. Let's first take a break, because I think that's a very good question for both of Josh and Herbie to answer. And we'll get to that after we take this first break. Basically, the question is, who made the personnel decision to go with Davante Harris to start the season and not King Crawley? Because we see how King Crawley's kind of excelled. I think it's a good question, and I think it'd be good to hear the insight from Josh and Herbie, who are on the beat and know it as well as anybody. But we'll get that on the other side of this first break right here on Dunc and Holder. You're listening to Dunc and Holder on Sports 1280 NOLA.com. That's radio. Stick with us.
What's better than that fruitcake you got at the office Christmas party? You know, the one that's been passed around for 5 years running?
Yeah, so you're not going to be able to hear that. I forgot about that. So we'll just relay to you. We can either text you.
The Sports 1280 All-Stars have your chance to win.
I want y'all to get in. Can y'all get into the YouTube chat? They'd love to hear y'all's thoughts in there. Can y'all do that?
Jeff, we got a Martin in Dallas.
All right.
Oh.
Jewelry's the perfect Christmas gift.
NOLA Cathedral earrings are just one of the unique and wonderful
So you go
Christmas
into,
gifts
you know, the
you'll find at Ramsey's
NOLA
Diamond
Saints on
Jewelers.
NOLA.com
$75 will
YouTube.
make her say, wow! Go to Ramsey's.com
And there's like a chat
right
down
now.
the right side.
Wendy's Double Stack is back in the 4
People like on there watching and
With
they're
a quarter
asking
pound of
questions.
fresh, never
First question was from a couple chicks want to know how come they can't see Herbie.
the Junior Bacon Cheeseburger, or the Crispy Chicken BLT. Along with 4 nuggets,
Kidding.
small fries, and a small drink. All for just $4. And it's only around for a limited time.
All the regulars in there. I'm sure that y'all can hear us right now on YouTube.
That's a
Loverboy Love,
can't be beat.
regular as always. Usually Val's in here.
Not valid in Alaska and Hawaii. Fresh beef available in the contiguous U.S. and Canada.
Spotlight the
Chinese sound. I didn't know that. We'll work on
interest
this.
rates is coming in the business week ahead, and another 0.25% increase in the short-term
No, it's
federal funds rate
just
is
the YouTube.
expected.
We'll get
also,
fixed.
this
Come in here.
on November wholesale and consumer prices and import prices, and November retail sales and industrial production.
All right, what we'll do,
along
we'll
with
come back on the
October
break.
business
I'll
inventory.
get y'all's thoughts on that.
Are you
And we
having
got a
trouble finding
caller
the hot holiday toy and child
on the line,
toys?
too. We want to hear from him.
Cyber scalpers could be to blame.
Dubbed Grinch bots, software allows scalpers to snatch up the toys before people like Anthony are able to buy them. They're then resold by third parties at huge markups on major e-retail sites.
It makes me very angry. If it's man against computer, the computer's going to win.
Fingerlings, normally $15, now selling for $100 on Amazon.
What do you think it is?
$1,000 on eBay. The LOL surprise doll lists for $10. It's $50 on Amazon, $500 on eBay. Nintendo's Super NES Classic, normally $80, is commanding up to $700 on Amazon and $18,000 on eBay.
We're calling on retailers to block the bots and give parents and kids a fair chance to get the toys they want.
NBC's Blake McCoy reporting stock dividends are at record levels this year, and they could be even better next year if proposed tax cuts are approved. Whether companies will use the extra money to increase hiring, as supporters contend, remains to be seen. But a J.P. Morgan asset management report on trends for the new year says a crucial component of future returns and the West, young man, but job seekers should consider the South. For the first time in 7 years, southern states are beating western states in job growth. Moody's Analytics says job creation in the third quarter was a 10% better in the South than the West, but the West has been on a downward trend, partly because of higher costs and also to fewer available workers in the West, especially tech workers.
You okay on that, though? The audio?
Everybody already has a job. Consumer and business news, Joe McConnell,
I'll just sit back.
NBC News
Okay.
Radio.
Here we go.
This is Dunc and Holder on Sports 1280, New Orleans.
I'm that flight that you get on, international, first class seat on my lap, girl.
Welcome back, Dunc and Holder, on Monday, December 11th. Without Larry Holder, my cohort in crime. Sitting in, though, for Larry, pinch hitting today, Jack Cassenstein and Herbie Tiopi, our NOLA.com Saints beat reporters. And I want to get your all's thoughts on the question from DJ in NOLA East. Who made the call early in the season? I think we all saw in training camp that King Crawley was making plays throughout camp. It seemed to me like he had the leg up, and all of a sudden they opened the season and it's Devontae Harris, not King Crawley. I think we all thought that was kind of curious, but it wasn't so egregious between Harris and Crawley in camp that I think you would say there's no way this could have happened. But I do think it was a curious decision. So, Herbie, I want to go to you first on that. Who do you think made that call, and did you agree with it? Do you think it was something that undermined the Saints' start to the season?
I absolutely think it did. To your second question, did it undermine the start of the season? Absolutely. We saw that in an extended role, Devontae Harris absolutely struggled in coverage. When you look at the defensive back group throughout training camp, they were going through a lot of phases, a lot of times where you knew that they wanted to build on last year. And when you want to build on last year, the guy that they should have really turned to was Ken Crawley as opposed to Devontae Harris, because Devontae Harris contributed mostly on special teams last year when he also struggled whenever he was thrust in an extended role on the defense. As to who made that decision, that's probably something that was determined between Dennis Allen, Aaron Glenn, and then also Sean Payton. Who's the guy we're going to go with this year? Is it Ken Crawley or Devontae Harris? And to quote from the Lost Ark, they didn't choose wisely there. They should have went with Ken Crawley, because you've seen what Crawley has done with this defense since he's been a starter, and he's been able to solidify that other spot there opposite of Marshawn Lattimore.
And it's usually, like you said, a collective decision. It's not one person making a call. It's most often a group decision that they all arrive at collectively, and as they say, once we make this decision in the room, we're all on board. And I'm sure that was the personnel decision at that time. What are your thoughts, Josh?
Well, I mean, ultimately the decision comes down to Sean Payton, and I mean, he's the one who will stand up there and take the blame. You know, anything that goes wrong in a game, whether it's personnel, whether it's scheme, it comes back to the head coach, because he's the one who has the power to say no, you know, to his underlings' ideas. But certainly, you know, I'm sure Dennis Allen and Aaron Glenn, like Herbie said, you know, played a role in that decision. And when we asked Sean Payton about it, you know, they said that, you know, Harris was more consistent in training camp in the preseason, and that might be true, but, you know, it's only to a degree. And I think, you know, we had pegged, I specifically remember actually one time when you called me into this show, and you caught me off guard asking me, like, who's a player that, you know, in training camp that nobody's talking about that's going to have a big role. And I've been thinking all year about Ken Crawley, but for some reason his name didn't pop into my head, and it still bothers me that I didn't say it, because
it happens, right?
Because it was such an easy thing to see that, you know, this guy had so much potential last year, and he was so close to making so many plays that if he just improved a little bit, he was going to be a good player. And right now he's better than a good player. I think if you look at, you know, around the league, Ken Crawley and Marshawn Lattimore, probably one of the best duos in the NFL right now, and we all talk about Lattimore, but we're not talking about Crawley. So the fact that the Saints whiffed so badly in those first two games by not having Crawley out there, and to go from inactive to starting, and starting well, and then replacing P.J. Williams a couple weeks later, you know, it's really crazy how that worked out. Because I think the issue with Devontae Harris isn't that he's not talented. I think it's just that, you know, the game right now might just be a little bit too big for him, and really that's on all the coaches on either getting him prepared or recognizing that, you know, the preseason play and the training camp play doesn't always translate to the regular season.
And the other encouraging thing about that is Lattimore is a rookie. Ken Crawley's in his second year. You got two young guys that are only going to get better. Let's go to the phone lines. We got Martin in Dallas waiting patiently to get on the line. Martin in Dallas. What's going on, buddy?
Hey, how y'all doing?
We're doing great.
Hey, I wanted to say, Sean Payton had mentioned that it was a confidence level, and I agree with that. You know, it's like you playing football, and he said these games should be decided on the field. And I'm not trying to harp on officiating, I'm not. But, you know, even yesterday with L.A., they called the leverage call. And they was looking for it, and I think what happens is like, hey, don't talk about the referees. Mark me, Jeff. The referees is going to play a part moving forward, especially in the NFC, because these games are highly competitive. These teams are like evenly matched up in there. And it's a flag call, a flag picked up, or something's going to happen when these games are won and done. And Sean Payton, you know, he took that chance, and he said it before. He said they should have like maybe they full time or some type of situation where it's full time. So we're not gonna like whine on that. He's just saying like the confidence level, and I could relate to that. It's like, okay, so here we go. These games moving forward are going to be coming important. There's one more thing I want to ask you guys. If you know this guy named David Newton out, you know, ESPN. I guess that's Mike Tripley's colleague, but he is one homer. He's like the day they had on the thing. What is each team moving forward in the next quarter? He just straight out. The Panthers gonna win the division. The Saints gonna lose one, and the Panthers gonna win. Anyway, you guys might know him. He always, you know, the Panthers this and the Panthers that. Anyway, that's it, man. I'll listen up.
Thanks, Martin. And David Newton in Charlotte, North Carolina. I guess he covers the Panthers for ESPN. And David Newton now being labeled a homer by Martin. But look, he's asking about the officiating. It's human error. You're always going to have human error. And I think that when officials are involved, you're going to have some good calls, you're going to have some bad calls, and I think in the long run, they end up evening out. It's just my opinion. What your thoughts? Anybody weighing in?
I tend to agree with you. But the only exception is, what is an NFL catch? I don't care how many officials you go through. I don't think we'll ever get the right response to that one. What is an NFL catch?
Yeah, and look, I think in the case of that Saints game the other night, because they were playing aggressively, both sides playing a lot of man-to-man, it was basically just line up. Your man's better than my man. We're going to see who can win. That's a tough game to officiate because there's a lot of grappling. And the NFL, of course, is calling these holding and illegal contact downfield. It's not like you're playing zone. It's easier to officiate those kind of games. But the Saints were very aggressive in that game, and that mirrored the game plan that the Vikings used against the Falcons very successfully. The Vikings only allowed 9 points, and I think they wanted to duplicate that. But the difference is you have a different officiating crew, and crews call things differently.
And that's the biggest issue, I think, when it comes to officiating and I think players, reporters, media, coaches all will agree on this. You just want consistency. That is the bottom line when it comes to NFL officiating. You have to have consistency, and we just don't have that right now.
I think it's hard to have when you have different crews week to week, and they all call it differently. It's no different than the NBA. Different officials are, more whistle happy than others, and you're always going to have that week to week. So I understand frustration, though. I do understand that. All right, let's take one more break here coming up. When we come back, we're going to talk to Fletcher Mackel, sports director at WDSU-TV here in New Orleans, get his thoughts on the Saints and the Pelicans, who had a big win last night against the Philadelphia 76ers. You are listening to Duncan Holder on Sports 1280, NOLA.com, and the iHeartRadio app. Stick with us.
I thought we were going to talk about Nick Foles here soon.
I honestly,
I wrote the stats down and everything.
Happened. I know, but something seemed like it happened. Didn't you feel like it happened?
Well, it cut us out briefly on the headset.
No, but I still feel like it's not quite as...
Good morning from the Fox 8 Weather Center. I'm meteorologist Shelby Latino. Temperatures will climb into mid to upper 60s this afternoon under mostly sunny and dry skies. Overnight, we'll see temperatures falling into the 40s on both sides of the lake as a cold front moves through and brings in a northwesterly wind that will cool us down for tomorrow. Looks like temperatures will only climb into the upper 50s for your Tuesday afternoon. From the Fox 8 Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Shelby Latino. Have a great day.
It's good, though, Mark. Thanks.
Cold and
you got it all. You got it under control now.
Let the Exogen Tempo Scanner help your family get through the holidays in a healthy way. With accuracy backed by more than 70 clinical studies, the Tempo Scanner makes for a great stocking stuffer.
Yeah.
No, I got you.
This holiday season, iHeartRadio has partnered with Red in the fight to
we got Fletch.
color or the cause.
Okay, that's good to know.
Shop Red this holiday.
Thanks, Clyde. Appreciate it, buddy.
Fight against AIDS. Go
All right, Jeff. Yeah, buddy. We got Fletcher. All
right, awesome.
For 150.
We got the Cajun goat on hold, so we'll have to wait till after Fletch.
Okay, yeah,
Shop
sounds
Red
good.
this holiday season and save lives now at Amazon.com/.
Cajun goat, New Orleans.
If you need a payday,
Avondale.
Apply in minutes on your phone or computer, and you could have cash in your account fast. LendUp.com, the better payday loan. LendUp.com, subject to availability in your state. LendUp is a licensed credit services organization, not a direct lender in Ohio and Texas.
What's up, buddy?
Can you comment on this thing as a
Philadelphia
guest?
Eagles are heading to the playoffs after a
so.
bittersweet Sunday. The Eagles clinching the NFC East, defeating the Rams 43-35 in a shootout in L.A. to move to 11-2. However, quarterback and MVP.
You have to be logged in on YouTube to comment.
Okay, so yeah, you do have to get like a login.
Backup quarterback Nick Foles says he was ready to go.
That's my job. That's why they brought me here. And just going in there, getting a win. Like I said, everyone stepped up when Carson went down.
Wentz will undergo more testing today. Meanwhile, Pittsburgh locks up the AFC North.
You watch that game last night?
The Ravens 39.
Unbelievable game.
Wild finish on Sunday night.
Steelers, Ravens.
Pittsburgh is a half game ahead of New England.
So well played.
Pats play the Dolphins on
so
Monday
fun to
Night
watch.
Football. Elsewhere, the Cowboys.
Antonio Brown take over.
To stay in the hunt in that
15 seconds.
NFC wildcard race. And the Yankees' newest slugger will be on full display this afternoon. New York with a press conference scheduled to officially bring in outfielder Giancarlo Stanton. That's sports. Jay Corwin, NBC News Radio.
We bleed purple, green, blue, black, and gold. Sports 1280 New Orleans.
Welcome back. Duncan Holder, December 11th, Monday. Not quite as manic, as I said earlier, with that Saints game, but nevertheless, it always gets a little manic when you bring in Fletcher Mackel to make his Duncan Holder debut, much anticipated, long awaited, and long overdue Duncan Holder debut for the sports director at WDSU-TV and great New Orleanian Fletcher Mackel. Fletcher, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Jeff, thank you for the nice introduction. Yes, I will be loud and talk fast like a nice shot of espresso for your morning listeners here.
Well, I know that you are ready to fight away on all things Saints and Pelicans as usual, and we've got Josh Castenstein and Herbie Teope sitting in, which I know you're aware of, and they might chime in at some point on the conversation. But I want to first get your thoughts on the Pelicans game last night. We were both there to see Ben Simmons make his New Orleans NBA debut against the New Orleans Pelicans, and for a while there, it was looking kind of bleak. I mean, in the third quarter, the Sixers went on a big run, and you had to be scratching your head because the Sixers were playing without Joel Embiid, without Robert Covington, T.J. McConnell, three other better players, and they had a big lead going into the fourth quarter, and then the Pelicans turned it on and put them away. What were your thoughts on the game, and in particular on the start that the Pelicans have had so far?
Yeah, also to add to your Philly kind of, list there, they played a back-to-back. They played the Cleveland Cavaliers on Saturday night and didn't even arrive in New Orleans until 3 a.m. Sunday morning. So they had everything stacked against them in that game. And when they went on that 40-point run, I thought, how does this happen in New Orleans? How does a team that played the day before, that is spent without their best player, seemingly have so much energy and the Pelicans have none? I think what we saw last night is the New Orleans Pelicans as they are right now. It's just a completely, bipolar on-the-court operation that you give up 40 in the third quarter and you look awful. But then in the fourth quarter, you score 44 points and you rally to win. And that's what this season has been. That's why they're 14-13. That's why it's a true roller coaster ride. And I know that that is such an overused cliche, but that's what it is with this team. Look, we know Anthony Davis is a great player. We know DeMarcus Cousins is a great player. We know at any night they are going to fill up the stat sheet. But as a team, I still don't understand how it all works, and I don't think many people understand how it works. It's truly almost 5 individual operators, and if one or two of them have a monster night, like Drew Holiday did last night in the fourth quarter, he nails 5 threes, he scores 34 points, they win. If any of those guys or multiple players have a bad game, well, then the Pelicans probably aren't successful. So, to me, it's a bunch of pieces, but not a team. And I'll give a lot of credit to Alvin Gentry. I think he's done a lot of good to make this work because it is all over the place. Rondo doesn't fit with some of these guys. Holiday doesn't fit with these guys. Cousins and Davis are a unique pairing. And I don't know if there's a vision for what it was going to be other than put these guys together and let's hope it works out. And some nights it works, and some nights it doesn't. And the thing that scares me, Jeff, is when the playoffs start, that's not good. To me, regular season basketball is highlighted by a lot of individual achievement in hero ball, a guy scoring 40 a night, a guy scoring 50 a night. But in the playoffs, the great teams like the Spurs and the Warriors, and even a team like Boston in the East, those coaches and those teams game plan, neutralize great players, and just kind of brush away with ease teams like the Pelicans. And so yeah, it's been, an up and down season, and I would expect it to continue. And
well, that's great. We might have lost Fletcher there. It seems like his phone went off. One question with Fletcher, and it was like a marathon answer. It's typical. He rolls on. I think he's probably still talking at his mid-city house to himself, walking around the living room. But let's get your thoughts. You were at the game last night, Josh. What did you think of the game? What did you think of Ben Simmons? I thought he was kind of breathtaking at times. You can see that kid's talent. I mean, he's going to take over the league at some point. There's not too many 6'10" point guards that can take over a game the way he can.
And Ben Simmons is incredible, and we don't even know what his ceiling is. I mean, he's 19 or 20 now? Like, I mean, if you give him a couple more healthy off seasons to, develop his shot, that's the one issue with Simmons, is that you're watching him and you know he's not going to shoot. But last night it didn't matter because he could just get to the cup at will. And I mean, the most exciting thing about watching him, he just dunks all the time. Like, it didn't matter who was guarding him. Like, if he was going to the cup, he was dunking, and it was so exciting to watch.
We got Fletcher back. I think the SEC weighed in and said that's the longest answer in sports talk radio history, so we have to cut him off here. But Fletcher, back to the program. Thanks for hanging in there with us and calling us back. Let's move on really quickly from the Pelicans. I thought you had some good points about that, but I want to get into the Saints, because I'm curious to know, we were in the press box yesterday, or at the arena yesterday, when Carson Wentz was injured. And you see at the NFC now, with the way the playoff picture is, the two likely top seeds in the NFC are the Minnesota Vikings and the Philadelphia Eagles, both playing with their backup quarterbacks. So I think the Saints have to feel really good about themselves in that they're probably going to have the best quarterback, assuming they make the playoffs, in the playoff race. I mean, you're suddenly going to Minnesota or going to Philadelphia, if that's what it entails, doesn't look quite as imposing as it did just a day ago.
You're right. One, let me apologize for my phone dropping. Two, let me apologize for my long answer. I only get 3 minutes a night, so I hear radio and I hear a long format talk and I just go. In three, let me apologize to Josh for cutting off his analysis of Ben Simmons. And I will try to answer your question now, Jeff, in a much quicker
time. Flex, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I would agree with you. Look, I still think the Rams are very formidable. I understand it's a second-year quarterback. I understand that Goff certainly doesn't have the experience that Breeze does, and that is not a battle-tested team. And with all due respect, they're probably playing on house cleans at this point after so many losing seasons. Just getting into the playoffs for the Rams is the win this year. So I agree with you. I think when you look at the NFC and the four division leaders right now, I certainly think you say, and I know this is another overused cliche that we all say, the Saints travel well now with the ground game and the defense, and knowing that you have Drew Brees as your quarterback against Nick Foles, Case Keenum, and a second-year player like Jared Goff. I certainly think, you look at the Saints now and say, they may be the chalks in the NFC, even if they finish fourth, right now like they would as a division champ, but wouldn't have a bye in the first round. I certainly think you could look at the Saints and say they're as legit a Super Bowl contender as anybody in the NFC.
What's your biggest concern going down the stretch with the New Orleans Saints?
Health. Because here's the thing, if they could, I don't think they're going to get up. I think I told you this the other day. I think losing at Atlanta hurt them for a 1 or a 2 seed. So I think that they're going to be a division champ and host a team on Wild Card Weekend. But not getting that bye, which would allow guys that are dinged up a little bit to have extra time to get healthy. I certainly think we've seen this defense turn around this year, but I don't think the depth on defense is there, and I think that's when they've been susceptible. So I certainly think that, if they're not full strength or at full health when they go in to the playoffs, I certainly think that they'd be, the potential there for an upset.
Fletcher, 2 questions. The first is a one-word response. Did you watch the Panthers-Vikings game?
I did. Yes.
So watching that game, do you have any reason to think that the Panthers, would be a tough out for the Saints if they were to face them for a third time?
Absolutely. Absolutely, positively, because beating a team 3 times in a season is ridiculously difficult. I'd like to find out how many times it's been done in the NFL that a team beats a division rival twice and then pops them again in the playoffs. That's a hard thing to do. And look, I hate the Carolina Panthers. I just, something about Cam Newton, it's just a team that I don't have a lot of, love for, so to say. But watching them yesterday against that Minnesota defense, which we know is one of the top defenses in the NFL, if they're a wild card team and they're headed to New Orleans, that's a team that to me would concern me. Same with Seattle, and I know Seattle's had issues, and it isn't the Seattle team that they were a few years ago, but they would concern me as well. But I would be really concerned. That would be the team I would circle most from Atlanta, Seattle, Carolina. as the playoffs are taking shape here, that if Carolina came here, I would say that is a potential massive upset brewing. Yeah.
Go ahead, Herbie. Herbie's got a question for you.
Hey, Fletcher, how much does Aaron Rodgers potentially coming back next week help the Packers in their bid to make the playoffs and get another elite quarterback into the playoff chase here?
Well, I mean, look, it helps a lot. I mean, one, you know, I love Aaron Rodgers. I think Aaron Rodgers is maybe the best quarterback in football, and with all due respect to Tom Brady. So getting him back, especially with what we've seen from Hundley, I think only 5 touchdown passes, fewest in the NFL next to Deshaun Kaiser since he took over as a starter, certainly gives Green Bay a boost. I just don't know if the Green Bays and the Detroits, I just feel like the NFC is so good this year. I remember a few years ago, you had, I think it was a Tampa at 10-6 that didn't get into the playoffs. I think there's going to be a 10-6 team this year that doesn't get into the playoffs, and there'll certainly be a lot of 9-7 teams. So I just, my feeling is, even with Rodgers coming back, and we can re-cue this in 3 weeks and laugh and say I was right or wrong, but I think that Green Bay is too far back right now. I think they're going to be one of those teams that could certainly finish strong, but just come up a little bit short.
Talking to Fletcher Michael, sports director from WDSU in New Orleans. Fletcher, one last thing before we go. I'm putting on the spot here. What seed do you think the Saints get going forward? How far does this team go?
I think the Saints get the number 4 seed. I think it shakes out, you know, Philly, Minnesota 1 and 2. Rams have the tiebreaker on the Saints. They'll be 3. The Saints will be 4. And I think the Saints are going to end up in the NFC Championship game because I think that the Saints are going to get a favorable playoff schedule and maybe get a Philly team without Carson Wentz. And they already went to Philly a few years ago and won there. And I think the Saints can get to the NFC Championship game. But if they have to go back to Minnesota, I don't see them getting past Minnesota or LA if LA is hosting the NFC Championship game. So I think the Saints get to the NFC Championship game this year, which I think would be a massive win for a team coming off 3 straight losing seasons.
Yeah, I agree with you on all fronts. That's about the same prediction I have for the Saints this year. And look, I think it's all lagniappe when you consider that this is probably a year earlier than most people expected this team to get back in the playoffs and start making a run. That's a young team that should only continue to get better and add a few more pieces in the draft. Fletcher, thanks for coming on the program. Much anticipated, long-awaited debut, and you delivered as always. We appreciate it, and we'll see you around the corner here somewhere on the New Orleans sports scene.
Thank you for having me. I'm sorry my call dropped. And Herbie, I'm sorry we didn't get to talk about the Punisher. I know that would have been the real burning topic for us to discuss.
Oh, my gosh. We'll have to get Herbie's thoughts on that after this break coming up. Fletcher,
I view Fletcher just went astronomically.
Yes, he did.
Love you, Fletch.
Fletcher, thanks again. And look, we'll take one more break here before we get to the top of the hour, but we want to get Herbie's thoughts on this from Fletcher. Herbie couldn't hear the question about the Punisher, but we'll get his thoughts on that after this break coming up right here on Dunc and Homer, Sports Radio, Radio, and NOLA.com. Stick with us.
46, thick and what you get, she'll work.
Yeah, he said, and Herbie, I'm sorry.
Coming back from the dead.
4 to 6.
Fletcher's a nerd?
Hold on. I was being on the high
we only had a headset
and I'm not
for
going to
you.
sit here and say, I'm sold on him now. And I love him keeping it
But
together.
Dave chimed in as well. Dave loves him.
New Orleans.
Loves Fletcher now.
Dave, that song I wanted to break was not edited.
From AT&T is here just in.
Sure it was. Close enough for government work.
Connected in the back seat so they can stream their favorite music, TV shows, music, and more. Also get access to stations and playlists.
I assume we lost Cajun Goat.
Go to att.com.
No, I told him to hold on. We got the Cajun Goat and a Larry in Baton Rouge.
Larry, is that Larry Holder in Baton Rouge?
No.
All right.
Is that Herbie in Metairie?
Oh, yeah. That's great.
What name did I use?
3 p.m.
For Metairie?
Schools.
I don't know. I made up some name for you.
Yeah.
There's a question in the YouTube chat for you, Herbie.
Time to support the Boys and Girls Clubs.
From Mike Hobbs.
GreatFutures.org.
North Pole Radio on iHeartRadio.
Santa here. Join me as I play all of your Christmas favorites live.
Herbie's lined up the program with his pop culture document.
Search North Pole Radio on the free iHeartRadio app and hit play for a perfect holiday season soundtrack.
Join me for a musical.
He doesn't have
It's going to be
if you believe the conspiracy theories, it's grand.
North Pole Radio on iHeartRadio.com or on the free iHeartRadio app now.
YouTube is set to launch a paid music service next year. Bloomberg says the new service is being referred to as Remix and will include Spotify like on-demand streaming and would incorporate elements from YouTube like video clips. Google's been in the music business in various forms since 2011 with Google Play Music, YouTube Music.
He said he thinks they're too far back to get involved.
Remix
like the one game too far back.
Better battery life headed to the iPhone.
They could affect the race because they could beat Minnesota.
AGI Securities says the 6.5-inch and the 5.8-inch OLED.
Yeah, they got an unbelievable schedule. Probably 11 o'clock hour we'll really get into it because I've got the remaining schedules for each contender, what the records are, all that.
Or it could offset more intense features Apple's plan to
Fletcher's
introduce.
now apologized 3 times
Apple could also introduce a 6.1-inch LCD phone next year as well. Apple TV adding satellite radio giant Sirius XM and its 200-odd stations to
11.
I'm back.
Tech Report. Larry Olson, NBC News Radio.
This is Duncan Holder on Sports 1280 New Orleans.
Duncan Holder on Monday, December 11th. Show is flying along here. We're flying without co-host Larry Holder, sitting in for Larry. NOLA.com Saints beat reporters Josh Katzenstein and Herbie Teope. We just had a visit with Fletcher from WDSU talking Saints Pelicans, and we want to go now to some of the phone calls that have been patiently waiting for us. And if you want to come in and join the program, it's 504-260-1280. Love to hear your thoughts on Saints, Pelicans, whatever. Cajun Goat in Avondale has been waiting patiently throughout this interview with Fletcher. Cajun Goat, what's going on in Avondale today? What's on your mind?
All right, man, nothing much. It's sunshiny and beautiful. No snow today, no ice in my can anymore.
Nice. I love it.
I got a couple things. I disagree with Fletcher on the Pelicans. The Pelicans' problem is inconsistent coaching. I think their coach, I mean, he praised Alvin Gentry. I just don't see it. The guy doesn't have, I just don't think he's doing a good job. Since he's been here, we went from a playoff team to a team that can barely even get close to the playoffs. So I thought Monty was a way better coach. But that's just on the Pelicans. On the Saints, I'm not going to get into the referee thing because I'm kind of like y'all on that. That doesn't really going to determine the game. It might make a couple things a little harder for you. Yes. The Saints had a chance to win the game.
Agreed. That's exactly.
Sean Payton's whining because he did a poor job of coaching the end of that game. He had the ball at the 20-10. He could have been running the ball. He knew his defense was tired. He didn't try to run the ball with Ingram none. He threw some little screens. Like, he gets fancy too much sometimes. And I think that's going to hurt him in the playoffs. He needs to get down to just the basic coaching, get these guys that are good enough to get you in position to win games. And so now he's trying to backflash on the referees, this or that. No, Coach, it was your fault we lost that game. What are you doing throwing? And I think if this is correct, I'm not positive, but the linebacker that made the interception, Dante Jones, I believe since he's been there, we haven't beat them or we haven't had a great performance on offense.
You're absolutely
Steve Jones, and that's what I blame for all that, man. I don't think referees or any of that stuff. And if we didn't have a big lead in the Carolina game, I think he did some bad calls in that game too on offense. And he can't blame his defense anymore because I think those guys are balling out. That's it. Thank you, guys. Y'all have a nice day.
Thanks, Cajun Goat. And look, some good points made. I have questions. I want to get your all's thoughts real quick on a point that Cajun Goat made. He said he felt like Sean Payton's play calling there at the end of the game ultimately cost the Saints the game. I don't think so. I don't feel that way. A lot of people wanted to run the ball. They weren't running the ball well against Atlanta. I mean, I think he went and felt like they had better matchups on the outside. And I think the interception at the end was just Drew Brees taking a chance. And we see him succeed in those situations all the time. And in this case, Deion Jones made a great play. Drew would probably like to have that one back. What do you think about it, Herbie?
No, absolutely. And Drew Brees actually told us at the post-game presser that's a throw that he probably shouldn't have made. Here's the deal, and I know the Saints have had a lot of success running the football entering Week 14, but that was with a formidable duo with Ingram and Kamara. With Kamara, out that changed a lot of what the Saints wanted to do coming into this game. That's my firm belief, because when you take away that weapon and what he's meant to this offense throughout this season, and now you don't have him after the first offensive series, it was a matter of adjusting, and I don't think they adjusted well enough without Kamara.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's one thing to lose a guy before the game, or you can game plan around that during the week. You lose him in the first series the way they did, and your whole game plan has to be adjusted. And you're right, they had to think on the fly. And I think it was a totally different offense without Alvin Kamara in there. They tried to plug in Tommy Lee Lewis at that spot, especially in the 2-minute offense, and it worked. I mean, Tommy Lee Lewis made a great play, scored a touchdown, but he's not used to being in that role. He's not normally in the 2-minute offense, the nickel offense that the Saints used to score right there before halftime was a critical point of the game, because they were down 10-3, and they answered with that big touchdown by Lewis.
But here's the thing, that last drive wasn't the 2-minute offense, it was the 4-minute offense, because not only did they need to score and get that field goal to tie the game or a touchdown to win it, you also have to consider the clock. And I'm looking at the game book right now. The Saints had 10 plays on that final drive before the pick before Breeze threw the pick to Deion Jones. They only ran the ball twice, and one of those was that 4th down sneak. So they only called one run to Mark Ingram, and in that situation, I mean, it was 2nd and 10 when they threw the pick. I mean, there's no reason you can't run the ball there. So I think, he makes a good point there that they could have been running the ball more, just even if it had more to do with the clock than it had to do with scoring. So, yeah, we saw against Washington that, the Saints weren't running the ball well until they were. So you just have to at some point commit to it. And I'm not saying that, it was that Sean Payton definitely cost them the game. There were a lot of things that went wrong, and Breeze's play was obviously the worst one.
That's the thing about sports. Always have different opinions about this. Let's get in real quick before the top of the hour break. Let's go to Larry in Baton Rouge, who's been waiting patiently. Larry, what's on your mind today?
Good morning, man. How you doing today?
Doing great. How you doing, Larry?
I'm doing okay. Just to touch on the Saints game on Thursday night, I think really the defense did a very good job to say, we had a short week. And really, I think the only reason I think we didn't run as well because Atlanta pretty much controlled the clock. I think they won a better clock position there. And as far as at the end of the game goes, I think, I didn't agree with that play call there. You go to Josh Hill, I don't know if I would have went that direction there. So, I mean, I don't know what Drew Brees could have been looking at, but it seems like Deion Jones, man, it's like some way, somehow, this guy wrecks our game. So, I don't know. And the last point I also want to make is, I feel like as far as the offensive play calling goes, I just don't understand, man, why we run so many wide receiver screens. I don't understand that. I mean, pretty much if it works, you're a hero. If it doesn't work, we really don't like it. I just feel like we should open the playbook a little bit more on offenses, especially if we're talking about making a run in the playoffs. And my last point, I wanted to ask you if I'm correct or not. I feel like the Saints control their own destiny at this point. As long as we win games,
Make it quick.
Yeah, jump in. Just take over.
We'll get to that after the break because we're going to break right now, top of the hour. But we'll talk about that when we come back at the top of the hour break. And you're listening once again to Dunc and Hunter on Sports 1280, NOLA.com. The Stickers will be right back.
I'm Chris Walton. I'm a truck driver from Missouri. For 13 hours a night, I sit in my truck and I drive.
Yeah, sometimes callers won't shut up. You got. When he said the second point, I'm like, okay, he'll be done. We got enough time. And he's like, and my third point, I almost potted him down.
I know. I actually don't even think about food. My knee pain went away. I've had some lower back issues, and I've noticed that went away. And I can only contribute that to Andro 400. One thing that Andro 400 said on the radio ad.
Yeah, this is a long break. We got about 6 minutes.
All right, bud. Thanks.
Is where I saw a drastic change in the size of my stomach. I've lost 6 inches. This product really does work.
So guys, if you'd like to experience similar results, then get Andro 400.
the safe, natural, and inexpensive way to boost your testosterone. Go to andro400.com or call 888-400-0435. 888-400-0435.
WODT WNOE FM HD2 New Orleans. Listen on the free iHeartRadio app. Search Sports 1280.
Fox Sports trending now.
The NFL Players Association is initiating a full review of the concussion suffered by Texans quarterback Tom Savage during Sunday's loss to the 49ers. Houston coach Bill O'Brien's being criticized for letting Savage stay in the game after he took a hard hit from Elvis Dumervil, then remained on the ground with his hands appearing to shake involuntarily. But after just a quick check, he was allowed to go back in for a series. Coach O'Brien.
With benefit of seeing the video that people are seeing, I would have never put him back in the game, but I don't see that. I'm not passing the buck. I don't have anybody that's been on the sideline of a football game knows that from a coaching standpoint, you really can't see things like that.
Now, after he did go back in for the series, they weren't satisfied with the answers to questions they were asking Savage, so they then pulled him from the game. O'Brien says if he'd seen the video, he would never have let Savage go back in the game. I'm Deb Carson.
If you love this song, then you have good taste in music. And if you love the crisp and refreshing flavor of Pepsi Zero Sugar, then you have good taste in taste. Pepsi Zero Sugar. If you don't love it, you haven't tasted it. Pepsi Zero Sugar. Max Pepsi taste. Zero in on refreshment this holiday season with the great taste of Pepsi Zero Sugar.
I'm beginning to believe that other than love and religion, nothing changes your life more than moving your credit score 120 points. I'm John Hope Bryant, founder, chairman, and CEO of Operation Hope, and we're working to expand and lift up your credit scores. Operation Hope is partnering with major financial institutions to bring hope inside to places where you shop and flock. Through the Hope 700 Credit Score Communities Initiative, we are helping people with free counseling, loan originations, modifications, and more. Go to operationhope.org today.
Ever dream of controlling your alarm clock without getting out of bed? The iHome Voice Bedside Clock System featuring the Amazon Alexa voice service makes this dream a reality. Now you can ask Alexa to set or snooze your alarm, play your favorite radio stations on iHeartRadio, control your smart home devices like iHome smart plugs, and so much more. Get the new iHome Voice Bedside Clock System enabled with Alexa and enjoy the warmth of your bed for a little longer this holiday season. Now available at Bed Bath & Beyond.
Spotlight the Federal Reserve. Their December meeting on interest rates is coming up in the business week ahead, and another 0.25% increase in the short-term federal funds rate is expected. Also this week, reports on November wholesale and consumer prices and import prices, and November retail sales and industrial production, along with October business inventories. Are you having trouble finding the hot holiday toy in your child's list? Cyber scalpers could be to blame.
Dubbed Grinch bots, software allows scalpers to snatch up the toys before people like Anthony are able to buy them. They're then resold by third parties at huge markups on major e-retail sites.
It makes me very angry. It's man against computer. The computer's going to win.
Fingerlings, normally $15, now selling for $100 on Amazon, $1,000 on eBay. The LOL Surprise Doll lists for $10. It's $50 on Amazon, $500 on eBay. Nintendo's Super NES Classic, normally $80, is commanding up to $700
Is anything going on in the world of sports? I haven't seen anything online.
On eBay.
We're calling on retailers to block the bots and give parents and kids a fair chance to get the toys they want.
NBC's Blake McCoy reporting stock dividends are at record levels this year, and they could be even better next year if proposed tax cuts are approved. Whether companies will use the extra money to increase hiring, as supporters contend, remains to be seen. But a J.P. Morgan asset management report on trends for the new year says a crucial component of future returns will be the return of capital to shareholders. And the old saying is, go west, young man.
John Dorsey.
Job seekers should consider the South. For the first time in 7 years, southern states are beating western states in job growth. Moody's Analytics says job creation in the third quarter was a 10% better in the South than the West, but the West has been on a downward trend. That's partly because of higher costs and also to fewer available workers in the West, especially tech workers.
Is John Dorsey any Chiefs guy?
Low. Everybody already has a job.
Oh, okay.
Consumer and
All right, 1 minute.
NBC News Radio.
Did you know him?
With AT&T, you get more than unlimited data. You get HBO included for no extra charge, and more announcers, like this news anchor.
This just in, with AT&T, you get more.
And movie trailer guys.
In a world of unlimited plans, AT&T gives you more.
Get HBO included for no extra charge with your AT&T Unlimited plan.
Requires an eligible wireless plan and activating HBO. After 22 gigabytes per line per month, you may experience slower speeds. Benefits start with...
All right, 30 seconds. The biggest
additional streaming and other restrictions apply. See att.com/unlimited for details.
Build it, fix it, remodel it. Get a free select power tool or battery when you buy a power tool combo kit for the busy DIYer on your Christmas list. Right now at the Home Depot. Whether it's a Milwaukee, Makita, DeWalt, or Ridgid, our tools are fit for any household job. Together, we're staying handy for the holidays with a free select power tool or
10 seconds.
Power tool combo
10
kit.
seconds,
Only
fellas.
at the Home Depot. More saving, more doing. Valid through January 24, 2018. U.S. only while supplies last. One transaction per customer. See store for details.
We survived hour one without Larry Holder. And by we, I mean Chuck Katzenstein, Herbie Teope. Officiating, just like the NFL, it's always next man up. Larry Holder took the day off. I think he's out Christmas shopping with his lovely wife, Joni. And sitting in on a Monday, a very rare free Monday for you all. No win up. Well, I guess it's not totally free. Chuck Katzenstein, Herbie Teope, hour two. You came back. I thought you all might have just taken off at the break and said you didn't want any more of this radio nonsense.
Here's the thing. You say we're surviving. I say we're thriving.
I like it.
We are thriving. I like that.
I like it. Well, look, we're going to thrive in this hour, too, because we're really going to get into this NFC playoff picture. I promised our listeners we get into it, and we break it down. It's pretty wild, guys. I mean, it's pretty competitive as I can remember. After 14 weeks of the season, you still have 11 teams in the NFC still alive. But really, for all intents and purposes, in my opinion, it's about 7 teams that are really fighting for these spots. But before we get into it, let's just go over some of the basics of the program. If you want to call in, we have a wide open hour, no guests. Fletcher Michael was our one guest during the first hour. He did a great job talking about the Pelicans and Saints. But this hour, we want to take your calls. So if you want to join the program, the number to call is 504-260-1280. You can also chime in on YouTube. Our guys right now monitoring the YouTube live site in the chat session. We'll get to some questions from that great group, our loyal YouTube listeners. But I want to break down the NFC playoff race now because I think most people right now assume the Saints are going to make it. I guess they could still not make the playoffs, which would be crazy. But personally, I want to get your thoughts on the rest of their schedule because I think they're going to win out. I think they're going to lose the rest of the way. I think they've got the easiest schedules. So let's go to the schedule the rest of the way real quick. Among the contenders, the Saints right now, guys, their remaining 3 opponents, the Jets, Falcons, and Bucks, are combined 17-22. The only team actually there's 2 other teams that have worse remaining schedules. What I mean by worse is worse opposition, and that just happens to be the 2 teams at the top of the NFC. The Minnesota Vikings' remaining opponents are the Bengals at Green Bay and at home against Chicago. Those 3 teams have a 16-23 mark. And then Philadelphia, who right now is kind of in the driver's seat, but they're missing Carson Wentz. Their remaining opponents are at the Giants, 2-11 Giants. They're kind of in disarray. And then at home against Oakland and Dallas, 2 pretty decent teams, but they're playing in Philadelphia. Those 3 teams have combined 15-24 records. So the Eagles actually play the worst remaining schedule, the easiest, I guess that's the right word, easiest remaining schedule. The toughest remaining schedule is Seattle, who right now has the Los Angeles Rams coming up, kind of a playoff for the NFC West champion, I would say. And then they have Dallas. They go to Dallas. And then at home against Arizona, who hadn't quite given up the ghost yet. They're still kind of fighting. And then Atlanta, who is 8-5. They're still lingering out there. They play at Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay looks to me like they've packed it in. I think they're done. And then they go to New Orleans, of course, for the rematch on Christmas Eve against the Saints. And then they have Carolina in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. They play a 22-17 combined record for their opponents. So I really think the Saints are in a good position here the rest of the way. I think they can easily run the table. I'll be shocked if they don't. I mean, I guess shocked is a little strong. I'll be surprised if they don't run the table, considering the Jets are coming in here without Josh McCown. Then you've got the rematch game. You know they want revenge against the Falcons. And then you go play a Tampa team who's going to have their backs packed, and they may be involved in a coaching search, a GM search. Who knows what's going to happen down there in Tampa. I really like their chances to run the table. Your thoughts, Josh?
Well, I wouldn't write off the Bucs so easily. They might have their bags packed in that sense, but I think
I'm writing them off.
There are plenty of guys on that team that I think want, a little vengeance after the way they were clowned by the Saints and Marshawn Lattimore. Like I wouldn't be surprised if Mike Evans, somehow has a big game. I mean, obviously, you'd have to do it against Marshawn Lattimore, which will be tough. But yeah, I think you look at the schedule and. I mean, did we mention the Packers? I mean, if Aaron Rodgers comes back this week, I mean they're in pretty good position. If they go, I believe they go Vikings, Lions, and then they have Panthers this weekend. So if they win out and they finish 10-6, I mean I think those wins would probably put them.
You think 10-6 gets in?
I think it might. I mean I don't
know.
I think if you beat those three teams to get to 10-6, I think it could get you in. But certainly I agree with you. I think the Saints should win out. I think their schedule, I think it would be a disappointment for them if they don't, because really the only team out of those three that stands a chance should be the Falcons, and that's just based on what we saw last Thursday, just based on the talent that the Falcons have, and frankly, as a caller earlier said, the Saints haven't played well offensively since Deion Jones has been in Atlanta. I mean, he had the pick six last year, he had the huge pick to seal the game on Thursday, and I think the Saints really need to prove not only to the rest of the league but to themselves that they can beat Atlanta and play well against Atlanta, because that would spring them toward the playoffs in a much better fashion than they are right now.
Well, look, I'll say this. Let me interject real quick. I think it's kind of unfair to talk about the Saints offense in that game when they lost their best playmaker in the first series. I mean, that's a huge blow. Herbie, you brought that up earlier. I mean, you lose Alvin Kamara, who's become this multifaceted weapon. I mean, he's been the top of the league. You lose him on the first drive. I mean, it's a huge blow to their offense. And look, they threw a pick in the end zone on the last series, or they might have had more points. I know you can't take that back, but I mean, they were in field goal range to score there. So they moved the ball a little bit, and Atlanta's defense has been playing a lot better. So I don't know. I don't want to overreact to one game.
No, I'm not overreacting. I said the Saints will probably win out. I mean, that's the nicest thing I could possibly say, is that they're going to win their last three games, and then they'll probably be in position, for a home playoff. I mean, they'll definitely be in position for a home playoff game if they win out, because they have the tiebreaker against the Panthers. But I do think the Panthers are in a good position to win out. So, even though that caller earlier said that David Newton was a homer for saying that the Panthers could win the division, I mean, if the Saints do slip up, I think the Panthers, are in prime position to take advantage. So, we'll see what happens.
Your thoughts?
The biggest worry that I do agree with you two gentlemen that the Saints should win out here. But the biggest worry that I would have are the amount of injuries that are starting to pile up here, because you've got some key guys. You don't even know their status heading into these final three games. Kamara with the concussion. You've got Andrews Pete, who missed a game. His replacement, Senio Kelemete, suffered a concussion. How long is A.J. Klein out? We already know Trey Hendrickson is out for the rest of the regular season. He's not expected back until the postseason begins. And we're talking about key contributors here. But when the way it lays out on paper right now, absolutely the Saints should win out. I think they'll beat. If you can't beat Bryce Petty in your home stadium, then you've got major issues.
Herbie's a hater. Could be him. Could it be Christian Hackenbach?
Who do you want?
You got major issues, so you have to take care of business here at home. And when the schedule came out, we all knew when we looked at December that December was the key thing here, and I think we all pretty much circled Christmas Eve saying this game right here will determine the NFC South. The Saints have to be able to take care of business, but they're not doing it with a full deck of cards here with all these injuries they have.
No doubt about it. Now, I would say this. You mentioned the Packers, and we're going to know the Packers if they're out after this week, because they're playing at Carolina this coming Sunday, and if they win, they're very much in this thing. But if they lose, they're out. And so I think we'll know quickly. I don't know, is Aaron Rodgers supposed to play this week? Do we know?
I haven't seen anything confirmed, but this is the first week that he could be allowed to play.
He started practicing last week, too, so the signs point to him potentially coming back this week.
While we've been on the air, it's been officially announced that Carson Wentz is out for the season now with a torn ACL. That's what the Eagles feared. So they're going to run Nick Foles the rest of the way. And I don't know about you all, but I think they're not going to be as good with Nick Foles, but I think they could do worse than Nick Foles, right? I mean, Carson Wentz was playing as well as anybody, was an MVP candidate, but Nick Foles is a few seasons removed, if I remember, setting an NFL record for like the highest passer rating in a season. This is a guy that's won some games in the league, been a starter, and in that offense that's now got these weapons around him with they brought in Jay Ajayi, they've got LeGarrette Blount, they brought in Alshon Jeffrey in the offseason, they got a good offensive line. I think they're going to survive this. I don't know if it's going to affect them much. Like, I don't see them losing out like a lot of people predicting. I think they're going to win the majority of their games. I'll actually be surprised if they lose to anybody here. They're going to lose to the Giants in New York. I don't see that happening, even with Nick Foles, and then coming home to play in Oakland and Dallas. So I think the Eagles, even with Nick Foles, still get the number one seed.
It's a good situation for the Eagles because Nick Foles has 36 career starts. He's 20-16 as a starter. And don't forget, in 2013 with the Eagles, he led them to the playoffs with an 8-2 record as a starter. Of course, the Saints beat them in the opening round. But the Eagles right now are not going to be relying on a Bryce Petty. They've got a seasoned veteran who knows the scheme, who knows Doug Peterson's version of the West Coast offense, so they should be fine with him.
Yeah, I think they've got good enough defense, good enough coaching staff. I mean, I think this is a better Eagles team than that one the Saints beat a few years ago in the playoffs. Got their first road playoff win. And I do want to get your thoughts. We'll take a break here in a minute or so, but when we come back, I want to get your thoughts on if this Saints team can win on the road. Are they better equipped to go on the road in the playoffs because of their defense, because of their running game? You know, they always say that stuff travels better, and we know that the weather is going to be bad. Some of these environments now, Minnesota, they get to Minnesota, they're indoors, but they have to go to Philly, if they have to play some of these other teams on the road. How is that going to travel? Because I think this team in the past has not been equipped to go on the road in the playoffs.
Well, I just want to point out really quick, Nick Foles, the record that he set was touchdown to interception ratio back in 2013. It was 27-2, which is crazy. Obviously, has not matched that level of play in any game since then, but certainly that's why the Eagles traded for Jay Ajayi. They wanted to have this balanced offense, and now you just give Ajayi the ball a bit more, lean on your defense, which is an aggressive brand of defense with probably one of, if not the best front four in terms of creating pressure both on the edge and on the interior. So I think the Eagles are going to be a tough out, no matter who's playing quarterback. But certainly I think, the Saints are equipped to win on the road, no matter where they go. And frankly, it's going to be a hard road for them to get, more than one home game just because they lost to the Vikings, because they lost to the Rams, because of the position the Eagles have put themselves in. So we're going to find out just how good that run game is, just how good that defense is. And I think from the Saints' perspective, they just have to focus on getting healthy, down the stretch of the season.
We will go in more depth after this break coming up, but I also want to get your thoughts on this team if they travel well or not. Let's take another break. Duncan Holt coming back after this break. You're listening to Sports 12, NOLA.com. Stick with us. He had a 119.2 rating.
That's not the record.
It's got to be a record.
It's not the record.
Maybe because
I told you it's not the record.
Maybe he didn't play long enough.
No, it was third. Aaron Rodgers at 122.
Oh, that's right, Aaron Rodgers, that monster. 119.2.
122.5 by Rodgers. 121.1 by
our little helpers for the winning keyword to call
Payton
in.
Manning. I heard it.
Start stalking, and we don't even care if you've been naughty or nice.
How long is this break?
I do.
Just a minute.
Except during morning raw, of course. Yeah.
I thought about saying go
Win
Cats.
Pelicans tickets on Sports 1280.
Go what?
Catch the games on News Talk 99.5 WRNO.
Hi, it's Jamie, Progressive's Employee of the Month, 2 months in a row. Leave a message at the... Hi, Jamie. It's me, Jamie. I just had a new idea for our song about the Name Your Price tool. So when it's like, tell us what you want to pay, hey, 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 and the trombone goes, blah, 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 and you say, we'll help you find coverage options to fit your budget. Then we just all do finger snaps while the choir goes, savings coming at ya, savings coming at ya. Yes? No? Maybe? Anyway, see you at practice tonight. I got new lyrics for the rap break.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Wendy's Double Stack is back in the 4 for $4 with a quarter pound of fresh, never frozen beef, which means you can get the double stack,
2 minutes,
or the crispy chicken BLT, along with 4 nuggets, small fries, and a small drink, all for just $4. And it's only around for a limited time, so you better hurry and get to Wendy's today. That's a deal so good it can't be beat. No, I said beat, not beat.
Sorry, man. Not valid in Alaska and Hawaii.
I think it's still
contiguous U.S. and Canada.
He wants no part of your music, mariachi. You keep away from him.
Coco still tops at U.S. and Canadian box offices, earning an additional $18 million in its third week in theaters for a total of $136 million in ticket sales in the U.S. and Canada. In second place, Justice League, which has sold $212 million worth of tickets. Third place was Wonder. Fourth place, The Disaster Artist. And in fifth place, Thor Ragnarok. Comedian Hannibal Buress was arrested early Sunday morning on a misdemeanor charge of disorderly intoxication.
Explain what I'm detained for.
A video of the Broad City actor quickly made the rounds on social media and showed the comedian handcuffed and asking officers why he was being detained. Charlie Sheen is suing the National Enquirer, saying the magazine defamed him by alleging he sexually assaulted teen actor Corey Haim.
I'm by winning. What happened? I win here and I win there.
Can YouTube hear us right
In
now?
papers filed Friday in Los Angeles, Sheen called the tabloid's allegations ridiculous and disgusting. The Enquirer's November 8th edition included a quote from actor Dominic Brascia saying that Sheen
assaulted
him
in Houston
when he was in his mid-teens
on the
and
same
Sheen
card as
around 20.
Fly the Concords and Dave Chappelle.
Release Lucas.
I saw him here with Eric Andre and Jeffrey Ross when they were all in town for
and
the
a Ford
Chappelle.
model claims late Partridge Family star David Cassidy was a first-class creep who groped her and tried to put his hand up her skirt when she was 19. Samantha Fox claims Cassidy, who died earlier this month from liver failure, followed her into a public bathroom and got handsy in May 1985. That's entertainment. I'm Michael Bauer, NBC News Radio.
1, 2, 3, not only you and me, got 180 degrees and I'm caught in between.
This is Dunc and Holder on Sports 1280, New Orleans.
Duncan Holder for about 40 more minutes here on Monday, December 11th. John Kallenstein, Herbie Teope sitting in for Larry Holder, who's got the day off. That might be his first day off in 2 months. I mean, he's been carrying the wood for the show, and he deserves a day off. I think he's out Christmas shopping today. I hope he's getting us something.
Yeah, I hope he's getting me something nice.
I mean, we deserve some kind of gift from Larry, don't you think?
I want a Star Wars or a Game of Thrones thing. You can probably find something like that at Toys R Us, Larry, if you're listening.
Isotoners, that's a good idea, Dave.
Didn't peg you for a Toys R Us guy, Herbie.
Is that Montana used to steal that?
Yes, I think so. Do they still make isotoners? Are they still like a thing?
I don't know. I haven't checked like Dillard's.
Dillard's? Yeah, that would be the place to go.
That's the only place I could think of.
Do people still go to like department store? I mean, I haven't been to a big box department store in a long time. Is that a bad thing? Should I be
expensive, man. I shop at Target.
I think I'm joining the trend of most of America, and that is just shopping online and having things delivered to your front door, and I'm probably killing all the local mom and pop shop owners.
I think you're just too fancy, Jeff. Some of us still go to Macy's because they have discounts and deals and some nice stuff, frankly.
Really? Okay, that's good to hear. I mean, we need Macy's as a sponsor now that Josh dropped their name.
TJ Maxx, too. Shout out TJ Maxx.
I just feel like the rest of the program, we should just dive into this NFC playoff picture a little more deep, as they say, and see where we think the Saints can play into this thing. Personally, this is my thoughts on the Saints. Take care of your own business, win the division, you finish 12-4, let the chips fall where they may, because it's still too convoluted right now to even know where they're going to finish. I think 12-4 is still, frankly, maybe on the outside looking in at one of the top 2 playoff seeds. Your thoughts, Herbie?
12-4, looking on the outside, looking in.
Like there could be 2 13-3 teams above them. And look, the Vikings could finish 12-4 and still beat them out.
You're absolutely correct there. Okay, so if you do finish 12-4, you obviously need some help from other teams. And crazy as this may sound, if you're a Saints fan, I think all of a sudden you become a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan based on who they're playing these next 2 weeks.
That's a good point.
You're playing the Falcons week 15, you're playing the Panthers in week 16, and if you're a Saints fan, you want as much space between you and Atlanta and Carolina. So I think you have to root for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
That's a hard thing to root for, I think.
But it makes sense, though, because you don't want them creeping up on you, and then just in case you do somehow falter, you don't want to be in a tie-break situation with Atlanta if they own a head-to-head. You certainly own it over Carolina, but I think you want more space between you and your competitors.
But you're left rooting for a team that's lost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 of the last 10 games.
Also, if you cheer for the Bucks,
good luck.
Does that mean you have to eat a W when they win? Because I don't want any part of that.
Well, they haven't been eating very many W's at all. Like I said, I think they packed it in. Now, I know they came back and rallied against Detroit, but that was at home, and they still were down, I think, 21-0.
I don't think they packed it in. I think they're just bad. They're a bad team.
Don't you talent?
I think every NFL team has some talent. I think the Browns have some talent. I remember earlier this year, there was a Lions player that said the Browns were maybe the fastest team that they had played. I mean, every team in the league has talent, but the Bucks don't have more talent than any of the other three teams in their division. They don't have a good coach who has any control over that team, and they're just a bad team. And now, because they have talent, they could, surprise us with a win over one of these teams that's better than them, but they're just not good. I think there are so many people that want to pick out the team that's on the come up, and so they anointed whether it was the Bucks or the Jaguars, depending on the year. So they're just like, oh well, they're not losing because they're bad, they're just having some issues. And no, the Bucks are a bad team, and until they reload with more talent. I mean, the biggest off-season addition was Deshaun Jackson, an old speed threat who is really not playing a premium position. It's not a good team. Now they could certainly upset somebody in these last 3 games, but the Saints shouldn't hope for that. They just need to take care of their own business, win out, see where the chips fall, and frankly, it will be hard for them to finish with one of those top 2 seeds because I don't know their tiebreaker with the Eagles, but the Eagles are up 2 games on them. The Vikings are up 1 game, and they're tied with the Rams right now, and they lost the tiebreaker to the Vikings and Rams, so I think we're probably looking at 1 home game for the Saints, and then we get to see what they can do on the road.
Well, if they win out, the Saints win out, the Eagles would have to lose 2 games, I think.
Right.
So I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, that's not happening.
I think they may lose 1. I could see them losing 1, but that's the most I see them losing the rest of the way. So I think the Eagles are going to get one of those seeds, and the fact that the Vikings have the tiebreaker. Now, the one caveat that we haven't talked about is a 3-way tie. That actually could work in the Saints' favor, because when you go to a 3-way tie, the tie-breaking procedure is different. The head-to-head kind of gets thrown out, and it goes to conference record. And the Saints actually have a good conference record. They're 7-3 in the NFC, and assuming they win out, they would be 9-3, and that would put them in legitimate shape to contend, I think, in a 3-way tie if they get in it with somebody.
Yeah, the Eagles though are 9-1. The Vikings are 8-2. The Rams are 6-4. So the Saints have a 1-game edge on them. I'm just saying, I don't think people should get their hopes up. I think you just got to hope that the Saints can enter this, postseason on a 3-game winning streak, and then take care of business from there. Obviously, everyone wants to have a bye, but I just think that the losses of the Vikings and Rams have made it too difficult.
All right, Debbie Downer. So if things play the way we think, and this team gets a home game, they take care of business, whoever they play, which I don't think that's any lock either, because you could be playing either Seattle or somebody, the Rams. But say they take care of business. Back to my original question that I wanted to get to. Herbie, I want to go to you first on this. Does this team, is it better equipped to win on the road in the playoffs? Say if they have to go to Philadelphia and play in bad weather, is it maybe better equipped to win a game like that than it's been in the past? I know they won there a few years ago, but they've won 1 playoff game in the history of the franchise.
As the saying goes, when you hit the postseason, you have to have a defense and you have to have a good running game, because who knows if that first road game, if it is in Philadelphia, you're not going to get the same white conditions that you saw just this past weekend between Buffalo and the Colts.
That was awesome.
It looks great if you're watching it on TV, but I know it's probably miserable for the players, and for a team that is known to want to pass the ball a lot. Obviously, you can't do that in those kinds of conditions. But if you have a healthy Alvin Kamara, you have a healthy Mark Ingram, and again, it goes back to the health of the offensive line. If you have all those pieces in place, then yes, I think they are better equipped to win on the road this time around if you're in the winter conditions.
I think the offensive line's been one of the strengths of this team. It's really, I know we've written about it here, but it's not talked about a lot nationally. I think this line is as good as anybody in the league. I mean, the Cowboys kind of universally regarded as the best line. The Eagles have a very good line, but the Saints line, I mean, they've had to deal with a bunch of injuries, kind of a merry-go-round in a number of positions, and they still played extremely well. Drew's hardly sacked at all this year. We know what they've done in the running game. At one point, I think they were leading the league. I don't know if they still are in yards per carry, right? The rushing attack, I think, was leading the league around 5 yards a carry. That's insane to have that kind of efficiency on the road, on the ground, and also be a good pass blocking unit. So I think that's a really good point, Herbie, that this team's offensive balance and the defense. But I will say this: the defense is showing some cracks. They finally played against, a top-notch offense, and look, they made some plays, which they hadn't made in a while, but they gave up some plays in that game when they really had to have a play. They couldn't really make it down the stretch. So I think the depth there is a question mark for me because of all the injuries that have been stacking up going forward. I don't know if this team will survive, but the one thing in their favor is there's not that many great quarterbacks left. Your boy Russell Wilson is a top quarterback, Cam Newton, who's been up and down, and Matt Ryan. Those are the only elite quarterbacks unless you throw Jared Goff in there.
Well, what if the Packers sneak back in there and all of a sudden you've got Aaron Rodgers in the mix?
I think they're too far out. I'm with Fletcher on that. Too far back.
You're just a Debbie Downer, just the same as I am. But the Saints do lead the NFL in yards per rushing attempt at 4.9, minuscule mark above the Chiefs, who are also at 4.9. But yeah, I mean, Saints offensive line, 1 to 7. I mean, I guess if you include Streif, even though he's not playing anymore. But if you factor in their depth, I think they're definitely the best in the NFL, just because, I mean, they've had to deal with so many injuries. And Senio Calamete counts as like 4 different players because he can play every position. And, I think if he doesn't get hurt against the Falcons, I think the Saints probably win that game. I mean, we've talked a lot.
You think he's that?
Yeah, I think
Senio Calamete is the difference?
Come on. I think the difference between him and Josh Laribius is significant enough that if he plays the second half of that game, that the Saints offense would have been better for it. And I think the other thing, they played a top-tier offense without a bunch of their key defensive players, and they still only gave up 20 points. So it's not like, they're out there, being bums, and they shut down Carolina the week before, and then we see Carolina. The Panthers are the weirdest team in the league. I can't read all. They've beaten the Vikings and the Patriots, and it's crazy.
I know, and they lose home games out of the blue. They're just week to week, and I think it all comes back to Cam Newton. Cam Newton is so up and down. He can look fantastic. He can almost be up and down quarter to quarter when you watch him. But there's no doubt about Cam Newton being a mega talent. I mean, he can take over a game, but he also can sink his own team with some mistakes. And so, but that defense is pretty salty, and they're still running the ball. They ran the ball well against the Vikings.
The run he had to basically win that game and set up the Panthers' game-winning drive, I mean, it was just wild. And that's the one thing, I asked Fletcher this earlier, but I mean, the Saints have to worry about the Panthers. I mean, I think, let me try to pull up these current standings, because I think there's a good chance the Saints could play the Panthers in their first game.
All right, well, look, let's get to that after this break, because that's a good point. And I want to get your thoughts on the Panthers. I also want to talk a little bit about the NFC West, because we haven't dealt very much with the Seahawks, who I think are laying out there kind of in the weeds. And that's a team I don't think the Saints want to play, just because of the way they play defense. That's kind of the kryptonite, I think, for Drew Brees and the Saints offense. But we'll get to that after this break. You're listening to Dunc, Sports 1280, and NOLA.com. Stay with us.
Supersonic. Supersonic.
Yeah, Seattle, that was impressive yesterday. They almost came back and won that game.
Your forecast on
Sports 1280. And they're like banged up on defense,
New Orleans.
Jacksonville.
This report is brought to you by the Exergen Temporal Scanner
How long's this
Thermometer.
break?
From the Fox 8 Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Bruce Katz. Today for your Monday, a beautiful day through the afternoon. High temp at about 67. Tonight going to be chilly, 40 on the North Shore, 47 south. And tonight as the front moves in, Tuesday and Wednesday, breezy and cooler once again, with highs in the upper 50s. Overnight lows right around freezing on the North Shore by Tuesday morning, 39 south. And then we do begin to warm up to wrap up the work week with no mention of rain through Friday.
How long is this break?
From the Fox 8 Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Bruce Katz with your Weather 40 forecast.
The holiday season means sharing meals, memories, and unfortunately, germs. Be sure to have an Exogen temporal scanner handy to protect the whole family from the first sign of the flu or a fever.
I didn't really say much.
Something to be thankful for this year is
I'll talk about this week
in temperature.
If you've fallen behind on your taxes, you know that the IRS is already coming for their money, and they'll get it too by garnishing your wages or maybe even taking your home or business. They call it enforced compliance. And you better watch out because the penalties and interest compound daily, making it seem impossible to ever get out of debt. You need to call the experts at Optima Tax Relief. Solving tax issues is all they do. One call to Optima starts the process to stop the demand letters and stop aggressive collection actions. They get to work immediately, fighting to protect your assets and helping you put your tax problems behind you. The IRS writes off millions every year, and Optima knows all the ins and outs of the IRS's tax assistance programs that could save you thousands. So what are you waiting for? Call Optima now for a free consultation.
Call 800-798-2477. That's 800-798-2477.
I think that's
1 minute.
that's the thing I heard about earlier in the season, right? That it used to be just a select few. Now everybody can get on. That's a good point.
For complete details, please visit OptimaTaxRelief.com.
Now that the holiday countdown has begun, count on CVS Pharmacy for all those last-minute little things you'll need to make the season feel special. You can find all of your holiday favorites in one place, like festive light sets, seasonal candles, and garland for the Christmas tree, all 25% off. And M&M's and Hershey's Kisses to fill the candy dish for your guests, now 2 for $6. So hurry into your neighborhood CVS Pharmacy and save big on all the little things you need this holiday. Restrictions apply. See circular for details.
About what?
My son Aiden has asthma.
What's going on?
Secondhand smoke has triggered his asthma so badly, he ended up in the emergency room and spent multiple nights in intensive care. Now he's on a whole bunch of medications. My tip to you is, don't be shy about telling people not to smoke around you.
10 seconds.
Thank you.
Half of U.S. kids are exposed to secondhand smoke. If you or someone you know wants help, call 1-800-QUIT-NOW. A message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and CDC.
Go rap for rap, I go pound for pound. At the end of the party when you're saying goodnight, you come to me and say, take it light. I'm your Mr. Big Stuff.
Learn what our insiders know about your home teams. Sports 1280 New Orleans.
Welcome back to Dunc and Got 20 minutes left in the program. 2 with Josh Katzenstein and Herbie Teope sitting in. And guys, while we're in the break, this story kind of came out. It's not really a story yet, but let's talk about it a little bit. Joe Lockhart is the NFL, I think he's the vice president of communications, kind of a big PR czar, handles a lot of Roger Goodell's PR work, and is an NFL spokesman basically. He does a conference call every Monday with the national media, and he was asked today about Sean Payton's criticism of the officials in the Saints-Falcons game. And Joe Lockhart's response was, I think everyone is aware of the rules that are in place on public criticism of our officials, and those who need to be reminded occasionally are reminded, end quote. And I think what that indicates to me is that a fine is going to be coming for Sean Payton.
I tend to agree, and you can't, there's nothing ambiguous about that at all. If you need to be reminded, normally the league will remind you with a slap on the wrist with some money involved.
I think Sean Payton is going to take that one. He's going to eat it. He's going to eat that W, whatever, eat that L, because he knows what he's doing, right? I mean, he's very, very cagey in that regard. I think he just said, you know what, I've had enough.
He knows exactly what he's doing. I mean, the thing is that, you know, he was cautious not to say anything over the top immediately after the game Thursday, but then after sleeping on it, he came back on and, you know, said Friday that, you know, he said it was, I can't remember the exact quotes, but I mean, he said it was inconsistent. You know, he said it was basically terrible officiating, and, you know, he said there's not much that they can do about it. They can send in these bad calls to the league for review, but ultimately, you know, he said there's a lack of confidence in you know, the way these games are being reffed, and So he knew that a fine was coming, and whether it was going to be related to his comments or the way he, berated the ref, late in that game to get that penalty. And I think, he probably, I'm sure he's upset about, the hit to his wallet, but I think he did it, on purpose because he wanted to show the players that he's got their back and that he's willing to step up and say something when something needs to be said.
I think the same thing can be said about, and look, I think Sean Payton crossed the line with his, I'm assuming the choke sign was directed at Devonta Freeman. I think he's crossing the line there, but that's Sean Payton. I mean, we've seen enough of him over the years to know he's a very emotional, impulsive guy. That's one of his great strengths. It's also, I think, sometimes one of his big weaknesses is that he is impulsive and is emotional. But that's part of the package with Sean Payton. And I think it's one of the reasons why the players like him so much is he is passionate. And he is on the sideline like a madman sometimes. But players know he's into it. And he's got their back for the most part during the week with practice. But they love that their head coach is out there into the game, going after the opposing team, sometimes the opposing coach. And it's one of the reasons why I think Saints players are so why he endears himself to some of the players. It's just, I think sometimes it could be to the detriment of the team because he's so emotional and so carried away. And here's what I would say. I want to get your thoughts on this. The disappointment I have in Sean Payton fixating on the officials is I don't think this team has made any excuses all year long. It's one of the things I've admired about this team the most. They've had tons of injuries. They just kept on sawing wood, and they haven't made excuses with the injuries. And then all of a sudden they lose this game to the Falcons. And look, I know it was emotional, and it was a gut punch the way they lost that game. But all of a sudden I hear this Thursday night stuff from Drew Brees. I'm hearing the officials from Sean Payton, and it just sounds like a bunch of excuses to me. And this team hasn't done that all year long.
And you had a chance to win. I mean, if Drew Brees throws a touchdown instead of an interception, we're not talking about this at all. Nobody's talking about the conspiracy theories, none of that. And frankly, I think it's a bad look for the Saints because you know Dan Quinn is paying attention to all the stuff that Sean Payton's saying and all the conspiracy theories that are circulating. So from his perspective, he thinks the Falcons now have a mental edge in addition to a physical edge. So when they come back for the rematch, 2 Sundays from now, I bet the Falcons are going to have more of an advantage than we would have thought, just because the Saints are a little bit being crybabies right now, and you just need to grow up because no one was saying anything bad about the league or the officiating when they won the 8 games in a row. And frankly, the Saints probably owed some thank you notes to the officials from that Washington game that called the intentional grounding on Kirk Cousins, because I think, watching it live, I definitely thought it was intentional grounding, but when you consider anyone who has watched football knows exactly what Kirk Cousins was doing. He was trying to just make a quick pass. He was on the wrong page with his receiver. That shouldn't have been a penalty, and that penalty played more of a role in the win that the Saints had than any of the penalties in the loss to the Falcons played.
Yeah, there's so many of these pass plays now in the NFL that are option routes where a receiver has to be on the same page with the quarterback, and it's all about how the coverage, your route is dictated by the coverage. And in that situation, it's a little different because I think there was an audible called in from the sideline, and Jamison Crowder didn't get the audible. Cousins did, and they were on the wrong page. But what I think happened in that Saints game against the Falcons last week, Julio Jones and Ryan were on the same page a couple times, and Marshawn Lattimore being physical with Julio Jones kind of rerouted Jones, and Jones made a decision, and that interception right before halftime was classic case of a quarterback thinking his receiver was going one way, the receiver went the other way, and all of a sudden you get this long return down the sidelines. It's really fortunate that Julio Jones made that tackle, or it could have been a touchdown.
Here's the bottom line when it comes to officials. Most NFL teams, including the Saints, have a 24-hour rule after a game. Use it. Now move on to the next game. We can't sit here on Monday and we're still talking about a game that was played Thursday night because there's some concerns over how some flags were thrown. The Saints are still 9-4. You're still in first place. It would be different if they're not, they find themselves on the outside looking in, but you're still in first place here. Now you get it out of the system. Let's move forward to the Jets. Let's just take the old Bill Belichick away. We're on to the Jets.
That's the one problem with the Thursday games. I mean, you look at a Thursday game. Obviously, there's the issues leading up to it, rest and recovery and things like that. The one benefit, the key benefit, is that you get a mini bye, you get a few extra days. The problem is the way the Saints lost and the way they're reacting to the loss, it's just allowed, them to just think about these issues when really they should have just been turning their attention, turning the page, to the Jets, and instead they've just let this pain linger, and it's obviously led to, all these conspiracies and things like that.
And that's all been enforced and directed by the head coach. He's kind of sets the narrative for his team, and he set a narrative that we are in a persecution complex mode, which I think is ridiculous. This team hasn't done that all year long, and all of a sudden they're aggrieved because they got some bad calls on the road in a hostile environment. Wow, is that the first time it's ever happened in the NFL? No, it happens all the time, and it probably is going to happen to Atlanta when they come in here on Christmas Eve. I'm sure the officials are going to give the benefit of the doubt to the home team. It happens. And you just have to move on. So I think Sean Payton has kind of let his team down a little bit there and stoked the fires in his fan base unnecessarily going into a big key stretch here where they've got to win out the rest of the way. Unfortunately for them, they get a beleaguered Jets team coming in here. It's probably not going to matter what he says.
Bryce Petty, go back.
Christian Hackenberg. Let's take our final break here. And then when we come back, I finally want to get to the NFC West rundown. I want to talk about the NFC West. I want to talk about your boy, Russell Wilson, who I'm warming to now.
Oh my God!
We're
a lot of time.
And we'll get the one. Is he the one Kansas State player left in the league? Wow! I don't know. We'll talk about that when we get to Sports 1280, NOLA.com, iHeartRadio app. Stick with us.
Jordy there? Jordy Nelson.
Jordy.
Terrence Newman.
Clay Travis.
I'm a First Amendment absolute.
Mornings 5 to 8.
I open up phone lines and let people just tee off on me and say I'm racist.
Why?
Because one, I know I'm not racist. And two, I think that allowing more voices to talk is always better than less.
And we got a Sam in Gretna.
Got any music lovers on your holiday list? You can get them the perfect gift in less than a minute. Quello Concerts. With Quello, they can watch thousands of the best concerts and music documentaries on a smart TV, like a Roku TV, or on the go. Quello's got everything from Elvis to Springsteen, Bowie to Beyonce, Pink Floyd, The Who, and so much more. In just 1 minute, you can give the perfect gift they'll use all year long. Go to QELLO.com/gift and give the gift music lovers really want.
Hello there, this is Nat King Cole, wishing you all a happy and a Merry Christmas.
The joy of living is in the giving.
Shit, I'm not gonna have time.
So let's give lots of toys for tots.
Since 1947, the United States Marine Corps has been helping Santa fill his sleigh, making happier holidays for deserving children.
Yeah, 1 minute.
Take it up.
Go to toysfortots.org and
I'm sorry. Who's the caller again?
More peaceful.
I already forgot.
I know, I did too.
Gretna?
Yeah, somewhere in Gretna, right?
Yeah, let me check.
And who have a need. Know the person helping directly at unbound.org.
Allison is...
We could talk about how this is setting up.
Sam in Gretna.
Gotcha.
She's humble. We could talk about how this is setting up.
She likes everyone.
She even lets her own tiny roommates revenge games and all the
Allison, wait, are you?
It's a good point. If they get Seattle, that's years old revenge.
That's the exact opposite of what I was just saying about you. Why, Allison? Why? Texting and driving makes good people look bad. Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Dunc and Holder now. Josh Innes next at noon on Sports 1280, New Orleans.
We've got 12 more minutes in this fine program. John Kellenstein, Herbie Teope sitting in for Saints. Larry Holder taking the day off. And Sam and Gretna's held through the forest. What's going on over in Gretna today? How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Jeff, Josh, I enjoy when both y'all are on Scotty Alexander's program. Y'all radio guys, but y'all excellent with the TV as well. I'm in agreement with this whining, belly aching, sniveling about the refs. I got a question. I was fortunate enough to miss most of the game. I caught it on radio, around work, so I didn't have to watch that typical Thursday night game. I have a question. Who missed more calls since y'all saw the whole thing? The referees or Drew and Coach Payton? Who missed more calls throughout the game?
Well, that's a good question, Sam. Thanks for the call.
Curious about that.
Yeah,
now, the thing is, the last minute of the game, if Drew makes that touchdown pass,
right,
a minute and a half left for Atlanta to drive the field. That's too much time. So let's assume best case scenario, it's still not a given we win the game. Now, if we dink and dunk those last 11 yards, all right, we're running the ball in or a short pass inside in the last seconds of the game. Atlanta can't do anything. And also, in the first quarter, what led to that first field goal? They're in the red zone. That should have been a touchdown. You could go back to the end of the game and whine, but there was a play in the first or second quarter that could have affected the outcome as well. The only thing I could think of, what was that, 3 years ago, Thursday night game, of course, and people have to understand it's Thursday night for the refs, too. But remember about 3 years ago, Green Bay and Seattle, that last play?
Good God.
That was so controversial? Yeah, that push-off?
Yes.
All right, that's when the last play truly affects the game. But that's my deal. That's too much whining when the players and the coaches have more control over the situation.
That's a great point. Thanks for the call. And I'll make a point on that I hopefully agree with. Here's my point on officiating. If you have one call at the end of a game that costs, that decides the game. For instance, what the famous Hail Mary call in the Packers-Seahawks game, then the officiating comes into play and you can talk about it. That's what pool reports are for. We've done that before. If you have one deciding call that decides the game, then you talk about the officiating. But to just say we had a million penalties called on us, 11 penalties, so the officiating was bad, I think it's ridiculous. Point out the bad calls to me. Point out the conspiracy, how the officials were all in conspiracy against the Saints to conspire to take the team down. I mean, it's ridiculous. So that's where I draw the line on. But of course, if there's one call like that, and look, Sam makes a point about the running the ball at the end of the game. Drew Brees talked about that. I mean, they wanted to take as much time off the clock as they could, but they were moving the ball so efficiently. The first order of business is just to score. You got to score to win the game, and you're trying to take off the time. But I didn't have so much a problem with the play call to Josh Hill as I did just the execution, and it was kind of unfortunate decision by Brees. I'm sure you'd like to have that one back, but I don't have that much of a problem going to Josh Hill. Sometimes the element of surprise works into account there. The Falcons are probably thinking, let's double team Mike Thomas. Let's worry about Mark Ingram out the backfield, and all of a sudden you get this backup tight end slips down the seam and you get an easy touchdown. If it works, everybody hails it as a genius call, and it didn't work.
Right. The one issue, I agree. I mean, I think, there probably weren't a lot of people in that stadium that thought the ball was going to Josh Hill, but I think the Falcons are smart enough to realize at that time in the game, they're without Alvin Kamara, they're without Ted Ginn, who'd gotten hurt a couple plays earlier. So, yeah, Josh Hill had climbed the chart in terms of guys that, Brees would be going to, so I don't think the Falcons were that surprised when the ball went his way. It is tough to, bemoan the play calling because, as you said, they were moving the ball well. I did say earlier I thought they should have run it more, especially once you get into field goal range. That's when you start running and seeing if, you can just, chip away at the clock. But I think the best question Sam had was, asking whether, the refs made more bad calls or if Sean Payton and Drew Brees made more bad calls. And I guess, we could go through and number them and rank them and do all this. But ultimately, the worst two calls of the game were not made by the refs. One of them was by Drew Brees to throw that pass to Josh Hill in a situation where Mark Ingram was wide open, and they could have just, kept moving and tried for that touchdown a couple plays later. So that was the worst call of the game. Then the second worst call of the game was Sean Payton deciding that in the waning moments right before third down, that was the time to go off on the refs and to get the penalty that sealed the win for the Falcons. So we can sit here and argue about the refs all we want, but the two most important people on the Saints are the ones that ultimately lost them that game.
I would say the worst call in the game was Dan Quinn not taking the 10-yard holding penalty. Allowing the Saints to continue the drive. It ended up working out for him. Yeah. But, I mean, come on. I think you've got to take that penalty there. The Saints, I'll say this, all the years I've covered them, especially with Drew Brees, they are extremely efficient at getting short yardage conversions. Whether he jumps over the top, I'm always talking about that in the press box, or sneaking. I think they let the defense dictate what they're going to do there. When they're in 4th and short or 3rd and short, Drew comes to the line, sees the alignment of the defense, and I think they either sneak it or he jumps over the top, depending on how the defensive tackle or nose guard is aligned over the center. But they always get it. And other teams seemingly always struggle to get 1 yard. It drives me berserk.
I've never tooted my own horn in my life, but I remember watching that game, I shouted, "The sneak is open," and Brees just immediately went just to the right of center, got those 2 yards, and it was a wrap. I mean, I could really see it 50-50, though, because do you really want to give Drew Brees another play to beat you? And that's the question. I mean, I probably would have taken the penalty, but, of course, I have, the luxury of hindsight.
I think a 5-yard penalty, you decline that. 10 yards is a lot. I mean, all of a sudden they're in 3rd and 11, and, but looking back on hindsight, I mean, it might have been the best thing for the Saints because they could have kicked a field goal and maybe had a chance to win in overtime, although I think Sean Payton had the right strategy there. His team looked gassed. They were really struggling to stop the Falcons. They were down in numbers on defense, and I think he felt like their best chance was to get out of there with a touchdown and sneak out of town. So I didn't have any trouble with the strategy of going for a touchdown there. I mean, you agree, Herbie? You go for the win on the road there, right?
You absolutely go for the road win there. And here's the crazy thing. I know we're making that. Here we are almost at the 2-hour mark, and we're still talking about the officiating. As John points out so eloquently, the Saints were in position to win this game, despite all the flags that were thrown at them. They were still in a position to either tie it or win the football game. The official did not throw that pass that Deion Jones intercepted. That's just the bottom line.
Herbie's slamming the table over here. He is
animated.
Yeah.
I like the passion from Herbie TOP. And look, I agree with you. Look, it was a gut punch of a loss, and I think a lot of the reason we're seeing all this emotions because it happened to the Falcons, a team that, let's face it, it's the Saints' biggest rival, and they'd been swept by them last year. And I think the Saints feel like they're a much better team this year and had a chance maybe to turn the tables on the Falcons. And that was a game that was there to be had. And I think that's why it was so difficult to accept because of that way it transpired. It looked like it was in their grasp, and then it slipped away right there at the end. But no shame in going to Atlanta in a hostile environment, losing by 3 points at the buzzer, basically. And they have their chance at revenge in what do we got now? 2 weeks?
2 weeks.
2 weeks they're going to have that game in the Superdome, and that's going to be a off-the-charts environment. I guarantee you that. So I'm interested to see how the Saints respond this week against a team that, let's face it, a letdown could easily happen. I mean, you're playing the Jets. Human nature is they don't have their starting quarterback. I don't know.
Bryce Petty. You cannot lose to Bryce Petty. You just can't.
He's because he's saying today. What's your point real quick on the baby cakes? We only got about a minute.
Look, I just need to give a quick shout out to the Miami Marlins and Derek Jeter for trading away Giancarlo Stanton and D. Gordon because that means the baby cakes, the New Orleans baby cakes are on the come up. The Marlins organization got 5 solid prospects, 3 pitchers, Robert Duggar, Jorge Guzman, Nick Neidert, and then 2 position players, Jose Devers, who I believe is the cousin of soon-to-be Red Sox star Rafael Devers, as well as Christopher Torres. These are 5 prospects that we will see at the AAA Baby Cakes team, which was one of the worst teams in all of minor league baseball last year, but soon they will be more exciting, and I will be there to watch them.
You got your point. Herbie T.O.B., thanks for sitting in for Larry Holder. I want to thank Fletcher Michael for his guest appearance today. And tomorrow, right here in Duncan Holder, right here at One Canal Place in the NOLA.com studios. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you tomorrow on Duncan Holder.
This is a tough time of year for people.
Yeah.
Talk about nursing around.
All right, guys.
An expert, Matthew Pittman, has some tips.
Yep.
Thanks, Dave.
What ends up
Welcome.
Because
so
Baby Cake's rambling over here.
than you would have if you had just had that other meal. So plan ahead.